Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Grand Slam Journey podcast, where I, together with my guests, discuss various topics related to finding our passion and purpose, maximizing our potential, sports, life after sports, and transitioning from one chapter of our lives to the next, growing our leadership in whatever we decide to put our minds into. For me personally, areas of business and technology. My today's conversation is one of our monthly coffee chats with Dana and Anna. Dana, Anna, and I met many years ago when we all worked at Ericsson. We stayed in touch throughout the times, and now I enjoy scheduling regular monthly check-ins with them, growing our leadership together, sharing tips, and practicing how to become better humans in various areas of our lives. Today's discussion is just about that. Before you fully listen to this episode, I suggest you to go to the episode notes and click on the TED Talk link that is in the first sentence of the episode description. It will take you to a YouTube video that is approximately 11 minutes long. During this episode, we talk about some of the takeaways each of us had after watching this video. And we try to put ourselves into that perspective of what would we do if we were diagnosed with an untreatable illness and faced our mortality. What would we change? What would we stop doing? What would we create more time for? And who would we want to spend the time with? Are we enjoying our present moment? And what is preventing you from starting all of this now? We use this conversation to slow down and reflect on what we would like to change and create more space for. We explore our regrets and how we think about past decisions, creating time for regular inspiration and recharge, and fun vacation plans. Please note that this podcast is separate from our jobs at Apple, Dell, and Ericsson, and opinions are of our own and shall not be contributed to our employers. I also want to apologize for launching this podcast a little bit late. My Ellie dog found a kitty cat hiding in the bushes on Sunday. And it was so tiny and so cute that we decided to bring it home and care for it for a few days. We were lucky to find an amazing and loving family, a new home for Kitty Cat, who is now named Mango. I have to admit, Kitty Cat Mango really grew on me. I took care of it for only a couple days, but it is one of the most precious kitties I've ever met. And I know it'll have a fantastic cat life with the family who adopted it. It was really fun surprise, and I guess sometimes you have to give up your podcasting goals in order to save a kitty cat's life. Feel free to go on the Instagram and see some of the precious pictures. If nothing else, I'm sure they will brighten up your day. If you enjoyed this episode, I would highly appreciate you investing a few minutes of your time and providing feedback on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It means a lot to me. And please share this episode with a friend who you believe may enjoy it as well. Enjoy the listen. Anna, you want to kick us off?
I'd love to. So we are always on the go, right? And we always look forward and discuss topics, and it's super interesting, but sometimes it's good to kind of stop and reflect. And I wanted to share an episode of when I did that a bit, something that really made me stop. I was having the TV on and I saw a Swedish morning show where they were interviewing this athlete lady. She was 34 at the time, or 33, I think, with her twin sister. And they were talking about the one sister had been diagnosed with cancer and her journey, and it really caught my attention. Her name was Elin Kjus, and she's a Swedish athlete. Since I've lived in the US for quite some time, I haven't followed the latest famous people or those that are in the media so much, but she had this charisma that really caught my attention. It caught my attention enough to look her up, and I saw that there was an announcement that she just recently passed away. And she had recorded a TED Talk. And I immediately looked it up and I listened to that TED Talk. And that speech was about her story, and it sucked me in. And I would encourage everyone to listen to it because it really makes you hit the brakes in life and reflect on the past, the present, and the future we have. Maybe it's long or short. So I'll just recap it briefly. She's an athlete, very successful, always on the go. I mean, she looks incredibly healthy. She's eating healthy. She's got the right values. She's just incredibly successful. She loves life, and she's very inspiring to people. She had this cough that started emerging, but she was so constantly on the go, go, go that she ignored it for a while. But after some time, her family members and friends were a bit concerned and urged her to look it up. And so she did get the appointment and didn't think much about it. But then when she finally got there with the doctor and sat down, he actually gave her a message she had really never imagined. And that is that she had cancer, and it had gone so far that there was no return. And she's very young, right? And she felt so healthy that she could never have imagined that she would receive pretty much a death sentence. And receiving such news must be very devastating for anyone, and no one ever expects it, but it does happen. It happens actually to more people than we know. I'm sure anyone who's listening knows somebody who has received a message about having cancer or any other type of illness that they never really could see coming. And so what does this do to a person? It took a while, of course, for her to digest the news, but her mindset was so strong that she decided to live life to the fullest the time she had left. And she actually ended up living way longer than the doctors predicted. And in the TED Talk, she still looks incredibly healthy when she's up there on stage talking. What I want to come to with this is you make yourself stop when you hear something like this. You're so immersed in the story that you start thinking, what would I do different if I knew I had just this much left to live? Am I currently living in the moment? Am I currently living in the present? Am I rushing too fast? Am I always thinking I'm going to the next goal without really absorbing the here and now? And what would I do differently? I wanted to kickstart our conversation with that in mind. And I would really urge anyone listening to watch that video because that was life-changing to me. Living her journey, how she told it, and now knowing she's no longer here, it's very, very sad. But she did do what she could with what she had left. And she was inspiring, leaving a message to everyone around who still are fortunate enough to continue their life. But we never know how much we have left, right?
Anna, I want to ask you, we hear about these type of stories all the time, whether it's people in our immediate circle or a friend of a friend or somebody on the TV. Why do you think at that moment in time that made you stop and reflect? And two, what did you change afterwards?
As driven people, and we've been in podcasts together, and we talk often about things that drive us and motivate us and so forth. And I think society makes everybody rush and things are going too fast that we forget to slow down and live in the moment. The career is busy. it's motivating and we want to move faster with it sometimes. But I think it's also important to slow down and stop and reflect, where am I headed? Do I really enjoy this? What are the things that really matter to me as an individual and to the people around me, and my purpose in other people's lives and their purpose in my life? And am I prioritizing on the right things? I'll give you one example. My kids, am I spending enough time with them? Am I really being present when I'm with them? You never can take time for granted. That was the biggest impact of that video, that people generally take time for granted. We have this stereotype model that you live until you enter retirement, and then you have a few years of happy retirement before you're getting too old, and then you pass. But what if we don't have that? What would we do different? Would we live this life in this pace, or would we slow down, stock every moment out of every day that we get? It's a gift to wake up every day.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I answered the question, but it sure made me stop. It was like a big red stop sign that showed up in my life. I was really impacted by the video. And the attitude that she chose going into that challenge, knowing that she wouldn't get better, but still she just put in so much effort into living positively and working out and eating healthy and being the best of herself, but also she slowed down. And I think that's important to do in life too, and enjoy. Like you have this lollipop you're trying to enjoy for the longest you can. Don't eat it too fast.
I have so many thoughts going on. One thought that comes to mind is it's true. None of us know how long we're going to live. So if we just go from that perspective, one trick that I have seen, I haven't implemented this, but there's a map that you can buy for yourself, or it's more of a poster that has number of weeks throughout your life. And so as you go through your life, you're supposed to check that week. I guess one question on that note that I always have is like, well, you don't even know if you're going to live all these weeks, right? But I think just that awareness of having something in front of you helps you realize, what am I working towards? What is it that I'm investing my time and effort into? Because time is valuable. I think that's number one. And tie it into this TED Talk again more. I don't know if this will come out wrong, but I sometimes wonder if it's in some ways easier to live if you know you only have this much amount of time, and easier in a way that you're kind of done with doubting and you just have specific time and you go all in and you risk it all because you sense that feeling of death or just understanding that time is very limited. And so the profoundness of that feeling and the experience makes us actually live more fully without all the additional things that come into our mind, like shame or lack of confidence or hesitations, all of these things that we would normally consider more. But because you know the end is coming, I sometimes think that it helps us rewire our brain to experiment. Like if we don't put our own obstacles in front of ourselves and we just explore our passions and things we're curious about and take them purely as experiments, what could we achieve? I think that's just a way that we should live our life on a daily basis.
Yeah. Adding a reflection I've had for some time, the older I get, the more observant I become of my surrounding. And I like to watch people, and I like to watch their lives in a sense as they're telling how they're living it. And I see a lot of people are always chasing the next thing. They don't seem to settle with their latest achievements so much. It's like they always chase the next and the next and the next achievement, which is sometimes good, right? It's not a bad thing to have goals. I'm very goal driven myself. But the message I have is stopping to enjoy and settle a little bit and celebrate what you have here and now instead of the rushing too much, right? Like slow down a bit and enjoy the present and the moment. And truly, like you say, living life. I think that's very important today because our worlds are so rushed and there's so much happening and there's so many impressions in our professional lives, in our family lives. Things get so busy that we just live in this hamster wheel. We just live for the next day and getting through the week and getting through the next month or 1 or 2 years. I need to get here. Sometimes we take time for granted. So I know it's a deep subject, but I think it's very important to remember that, hey, we need to live in the moment. We need to live here and now. And if I knew I would die or died and could come back and live my life again, what would I change? I think it's important to sometime in life to stop and think about what would I do differently. Sometimes I play actually with a thought. In my real life, I hold back with things sometimes because I'm too shy or I don't have the courage to do certain things. But what if I pretended I already died and I had a chance to come back and relive the same life? What would I do differently? Oh, I would go in and be more bold or maybe more courageous in certain aspects, or I would do this or that.
What would you change?
I think my attitude sometimes and not being too gentle and too shy, grasping opportunities. And I think I've kind of mentally prepared myself more as I've matured and gotten older, like go all in, don't hold back, grab opportunities when they come and speak your mind. Don't be afraid of what everybody will think of you always, because you have the same right as everyone else to express, hey, here's my standpoint and you're welcome to come with your input and we can evolve the conversation together. I used to hold back a lot before.
This makes me think our discussion we had last time about women and the progress. Do you think it is because of we are in male-dominated industry and you hold yourself back because you don't see the alliance in the room? Or is it personality trait? Is it observed? If you look back, and I don't know if you have specific moment you want to share or experience.
Not gender-driven at all, because I don't think I've been impacted too much about that. I think it's more cultural. In one of our episodes, we talked about different cultures where you're brought up. In the Swedish culture, the way I was brought up it's hard to describe the Swedish culture, but they're more held back. And there are certain unwritten rules, like you should never boast about any of your accomplishments or speak openly about how proud you are of some of your accomplishments, or if you've reached a goal. You just don't do that. That's kind of a negative thing in Sweden, like don't brag. Anything in that direction would be considered bragging. Whereas in the American culture, we celebrate other people's successes, and it's not bragging, it's more saying, hey, I've reached this milestone. I'm really proud of my accomplishment. That could be one example. It's hard to put my finger on it. It's just culturally, you should never try to stand out. It's such a socialistic country in a sense that your objective is to blend in with the group and not stand out as an individual. So you always kind of become hidden and unnoticed, and you hold back with a lot of things. And it's kind of part of the DNA, it's part of the culture. And that's not exactly in line. That culture never really fit me as a personality, because I like to be confident. I like to experiment and challenge myself with things and surprise myself with accomplishments, right? And failures too, because failing is good. You learn a ton from failing, and you learn a ton about yourself and your capability. So, yeah.
I want to take us back to where we started, this concept about limited time. And if you know that you're going to die soon, what would you do differently? I think for me, I have a slightly different perspective. And maybe it's going to your point, Anna, about culture and how you were raised up. I grew up in an environment where you could die any moment. We would go to school in the morning and we don't know if we will be going back home that day or we have to spend the night in the shelter. And you see those type of events over a period of so many years. So I have a more of a laissez-faire attitude towards death.
Yeah.
It's something that's going to happen. it can happen at any moment. And maybe part of that also is coupled with faith, is that life does not end with death. There's a next adventure that's going to start right after that. And that's always been exciting for me to figure out what's next. So for me growing up, knowing that my life is going to end at any moment was not a big deal. I feel like, okay, I'm ready for it whenever it comes. I used to feel sorry for my mom if I were to pass away suddenly, right? And now that I have children, you want to hold on to what you know and maximize the time you have with them. Like I would feel sorry if I were to go tomorrow and not being able to spend more time with them. So the way I have been reflecting on things lately is that this concept of as we live life, we spend a lot of time thinking about the past, what has happened, what could have happened, and thinking about the future, but not enough time living in the here and now and in the present. So for the past, year or so, I've been trying to be more present in what I do. And I've become sort of occupied with this notion of making sure that you're maximizing your contribution. And that would be a contribution to, your family, to yourself, to your friends, to work, like making your highest contribution. And I kind of like that angle versus somebody living to their potential, because you're not always necessarily chasing what's next, but you're focusing on the thing that you're engaged with in the moment. And are you making your highest contribution in that moment? And are you taking care of yourself? Are you prepared mentally, physically, so that you're maximizing your contribution and your enjoyment of that moment? So being busy and like life being a whirlwind is actually something I enjoy, right? I love when I start my day early in the morning and I've got a lot of things ahead of me at work. I'm going after them and I feel like I'm making a difference in what I'm doing. And then the day ends and I go and rush to get somebody to soccer or somebody to dance and then rush back and do dinner. It's a whirlwind of activities. But I feel comforted by the fact that in this whirlwind of activities, I'm really trying hard to make my highest contribution. And if that ends tomorrow, well, that would be sad. But maybe I've made enough impact and I created enough memories for the people that I care about that it isn't so bad.
I love that.
That was really well put. So amazing.
I prepared one quote that really resonated with me. I think I just want to tie it on Dana. I'm not religious, but if I were to be religious, I think I mostly resonate with Buddhism in general. And so the quote is from Gandhi, and it states, "Whatever you do in life will be insignificant, but it is very important that you do it because you can't know. You can't ever know the meaning of your life, and you don't need to. Every life has a meaning, whether it lasts 100 years or 100 seconds. Every life and every death changes the world in its own way. You can't know. So don't take it for granted, but don't take it too seriously. Don't postpone what you want. Don't leave anything misunderstood. Make sure the people you care about know. Make sure they know how you really feel, because just like that, it could end." I think it ties a little bit on Anna's upbringing, and thank you for describing it, because I always wonder if you grow up in some of these really unstable countries where bombs are landing left and right. Like I just can't imagine living in these type of situations. And I always wondered the resilience you gain from that. When we lived in Jersey, our house was right next to a cemetery. And I could literally see the cemetery from my bedroom. So when I get up every morning, I look outside, and I actually loved it, because you get up, it's like any day I could be on the other side of the fence, laying under a rock. Today I'm alive. And so what do I want to do with the day, and how do I want to claim the day? I actually found it very positive, but what I've learned is not very good for resale, especially for Asian communities. If you want to resell a house, not a good investment. But I find it actually very inspirational view in the morning, knowing that you're still alive and you could be on the other side of the fence any day.
Right. And I think that's exactly the nail on the head of the realization and awakening I was trying to describe with watching that video, and you got it every day. So it's a touch of reality, being reminded that I'm still alive. What am I doing? And to Dana's, your point, right? Maximizing it to the fullest. Just being reminded of it was so enlightening in a sense. I can't even describe it. It's like, I got another full day. I'm well. I'm not sick. I can do something good with it. It's in my power to do something good with it and make good impacts on other people. How do I want them to remember me? And am I doing things that matter?
Yeah. And we say it's very personal, right? It's going back maybe to our first podcast that we did in January with goal setting. And what I'm hearing from each of us again is the way we do our goal setting really aligns even to this conversation, because it means whatever is important for us, that's how we learn to navigate and tweak our daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly schedules to create that time that we need. And I just want to go back to the word busy. I hate the word busy. It's nowadays being used in society as something positive, like a meaning of importance. I strongly believe that we have the power to structure the life that we want. It is on us to decide and discern what we're saying yes to and what we're saying no to. And if you're so busy that you don't have time for the things that are most important, that means that you're just saying yes to too many things. And really, between us friends, saying yes is way more easier than saying no. So practice and learn to say no and know what you want to say yes to. Because I used to think time is important, and it still is. But I think the effort and the energy we put into things is even more important. So for me, if I say yes to something, I want to say yes to only things that I know I can do with my full heart and soul, 100%. And if it doesn't resonate with me 100%, it means it's a no. I shouldn't invest my time and energy into, because it's not something that is important for me at this time. That can change, a month or a quarter or 6 months later. But discerning what is it that I have time for and I want to put my mind and creative energy into is super important. It's a way how I navigate my schedule. It's a way how I orchestrate my day and weeks and create space for the people that I want to have in my circle. I'm very picky of who I talk to. I'm very picky who I create time for and who I hang out with. And I keep that circle tight for a reason, because I believe that those are the people that help pull me up, that I want to hang out with, and that align with who I want to be and who I want to interact with.
If I can add to that, I think when we first started, I was talking about this new habit or experiment of waking up really early and trying to make the most of the early morning hour. And I think one of the things that have been positive about this experiment is first thing in the morning, taking a few moments and thinking about what is it the one thing that's most important for me to tackle today? Like, what is the purpose of the day? And then going back and rearranging my schedule and saying no to things or yes to things from that perspective. I totally agree with you, Clara. There's so many things that can suck somebody's energy away and it can keep you busy. And I think with age comes maturity and the courage to say no. And now I yield no left and right with no shame or regret or hesitation.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's a great skill to continue to practice and grow. And I think it's even more important as we grow through life. I think the reality is, as you grow through life, you grow in the experience and skills, etc. So in some ways, you gain more opportunities. What do you would like to do next, right? What do you want to invest your time and energy into? Then if you look at the beginnings of your career, like when I got my first job, I had one opportunity and I said yes to, right? Now, let's say I can choose from 5, 6, 7 different directions. So we probably have more choices. And because of that, I think we need to be even more aware and picky to which choice we want to take that aligns more with the effort we want to put in.
Mm-hmm. Really good food for thought.
So I have a question for both of you. Hannah, you said that you go through this mental exercise. If you were to restart your life or come back at a different time and relive it, what would you do differently? How do you handle regrets? Sometimes you make the best choices that you think that you're doing in the moment, and the hindsight turns out that that choice was not the best possible choice. It can lead to some really bad externalities and side effects. I had the attitude of whatever happened, happened. It led you to where you are today and you move on. But then lately I've started thinking about some choices that I've made in the past, and maybe they weren't the wisest of choices. And it's easy to kind of sit with that thought and feel down. And at times I try to shake it off and say, okay, well, where do I go from here, right? What I would do differently now? I'm just curious of how do you handle those type of thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Well, I once heard something that stuck with me, and that was someone say, you should never regret the things you did. You should regret the things you didn't do. And that got me reflecting. It's a very difficult question to answer because before going into something you don't know, you're going to regret it. It's a learning in the hindsight. And my belief is you can only change the future, right? So those regrets you may have, the good that can come out of those is how you live your life going forward. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question really, but failures are kind of part of life or any journey, and we should not be afraid of making them as long as we learn from them. I think those are super essential messages about what we do in the future, what choices we may do going forward, and what lessons we want to pass on to other people that we care about in our surrounding. Whether it's our children, we want to teach certain lessons, mistakes we've done ourselves. Not sure if I answered it, Dana.
Dana, sorry, I forgot. What was the question? How do we look at regrets?
Yes.
How do we think about restarting? Yeah. So I think there's difference how I look at it now versus in the past. I actually have thought about this question quite a bit, and I think it is unfair to look at past decisions from hindsight because you always know much more. And so how I rewired how I look at my past decisions is to ask myself the question, knowing what I knew then, would I still make the same decision? Because I think it's unfair to kind of value your decision based on all of the additional information you gathered 6 months, year, or 2 years later. So if you just go back to the decision point and you ask the question, backtracking, knowing what I knew then and the criteria I set for making that decision, would I still make the right decision? And when I ask that question, there actually hasn't been probably one decision I have made in my past that would be inaccurate. There was only one decision I have made that I made from fear, and I actually talked about it during one of my episodes. I can send a link. I actually don't remember which one. But if somebody wants to dive into regrets, I actually listened to a few podcast episodes. There is a fantastic book. I haven't read yet. It's on my list, but it's The Power of Regret by Daniel Pink. And so it talks about how looking backward moves us forward. And so he argues that looking at regrets can help you understand what you value. So if you look back on the past and the decisions you have made, it's more of a learning about the values that you have that helps you refine the decisions going forward. But I think I generally agree that looking backward is typically stupid. Like having regrets doesn't help much unless it is to learn more about yourself. So it can help in some ways to help you refine what are the values and things you want to make going forward. Like, I don't like playing this game, like starting over and maybe this is naive, I truly appreciate every single experience I've had in my life. And the shittier the experience, the more I appreciate it. Because I really think I've learned from these the most. Like, it's the hardest times that shaped me to who I am as a person. And so these are the things that help me become the leader. Like, usually it seems like knowing who you don't want to be is sometimes easier. And so having the poor views of leadership kind of helps you shape who you want to be as a leader and be the opposite. And so you have to go through these bad experiences that helps you refine what's the opposite and who I want to be as a person.
Yeah. And also when we talk about regret, it's also what we do with the information that comes from regret. If one chooses to beat yourself up as a result of something you regret and keep looking in the past and beating yourself up about it, that's not very good use of it, right? But to your point, if you take a learning from it to plug it into something going forward, or you learn something about yourself or your capabilities, or you can change something in choices going forward, I think that's when it really comes to good use and you move on.
Yes. And I would say you need maturity for it. I beat myself up all the time when I was a kid. It's just you don't have that maturity, I think, to control your brain as much. So I think the value of growing older, you create all of these tactics and you learn what are the boundaries of when your brain goes to the unproductive thoughts versus productive, so you can catch yourself sooner until you get into the dark spiraling tunnel of unproductive shit. Sorry, that's like the only thing I can. And then the deeper you are, the harder it is to pull yourself up. And I think because I have been to these dark tunnels in the past, I'm more aware how not to get there. So I can switch to the productive mode or stop the spiraling dark thoughts way sooner than I used to when I was 15, 18, 20. Dana, how about you? Do you have any regrets and how do you deal with them?
I do. I think I would just approach it the way you said, Clara. Given what I knew at the time, did I behave in the most optimal way? Did I make the best possible decision? What would I do differently? And in some instances, I wouldn't change anything. In others, I would have want to have made a different choice. But then again, if I made that different choice, I wouldn't have carried the learnings into this day. So yeah, no life is perfect. No decision making is perfect. And there are some experiences there that maybe I wouldn't have wanted to have, or I could have done something different about it. It's just that, fine balance of when you go back and reminisce about things, to do so with as little emotion as possible, if that's even possible, I guess. Try to separate the mind from the feelings and to not sit in the feelings and try to look at the situation as objectively as possible and get the most learning out of it and just move on.
I agree. I think life is one big experience. And if you take life as just experience and experimentation, and you don't tie yourself too much to things, and you take opportunities only to explore what's possible and what you're curious about and dive deeper, I think most of what you're saying yes to at the moment is kind of known. And maybe even just the simplest example is like applying for a new job. Because we all have done that, right? Even listeners. Like when you're applying for a new job, you go to the job interview. First of all, the description is probably only about 50% accurate of what the job is. I think that's kind of average from my experience. I don't know if you would disagree with it drastically, ladies, from your jobs. Have you ever had a job where the description was more than 50% accurate?
That is a good question. It really makes me think.
Yeah.
Okay, it seems like you haven't thought about it. We can reflect on it later. So I think description is only 50% accurate. You go to the interview, you try to position yourself in the best light you can, that the person you're interviewing and company is interviewing is trying to sell themselves to you on the position that is still only about 50% accurate to close you on that opportunity, right? And then you say the yes to the opportunity. Let's say this is the ideal path. You go through an interview, you agree on the dollar amount that you're willing to invest your time and energy into, to value your time and effort and the experience you bring in. And then you start. And then it typically turns out that's where the real experience begin, right? The first 6 months, that's the getting to know each other. It's like the realness of the dating. So I always think of like the dating world. You go on the first couple dates and everybody presents themselves in the best light. That's the interview process. But once you kind of start dating more 1 to 3 months later, you kind of trying to figure out, is this person really real? Like, what's the face, right? So when you accept the job, usually the reality looks quite different, at least from my experience, than when you went through the application process. So it's always a rosier, more polished view versus the reality of any sort of job I've ever taken back in the past. And it doesn't mean it's a good or bad thing. It just means you will always be making decisions under uncertainty. And so if you believe that the next opportunity, and this could be job or anything else, is at least 50% accurate and has enough space for you to try to align it with the values and the effort you want to put in and explore that area of curiosity, then I think you say yes. And you experiment with it for 3, 4, 6 months. And if it's still a fit, you keep going. If it's not a fit, then you change it. I think life should be way more fluid. I think we sometimes put too much weight into the decision that we're making, or we're taking it almost too seriously. So if you add a little bit of playfulness to it, I think we will be more relaxed, more loose. It can become more fun. And it doesn't mean that we can be serious and committed and still put our 100% to it, but just don't put so much judgment and pressure on yourself, like if I don't put so much pressure on myself, I perform way better. So creating that space for playfulness and exploration is actually an important aspect for me to keep in life. And I perform better in that space than when I'm overly serious about something. It starts having detrimental effect to my performance when I'm going to prove myself. That's like the worst position.
I think you have a very, very good point and a very good message in that when you're describing the determination and being driven, right? And adding the playfulness, I'm circling back to where we started, actually, that video and some of the messages in that video, right? Being stuck in a hamster wheel, things are moving very fast. We're very serious about things. And oftentimes we also forget to ask ourselves, am I living right now? Am I happy? Am I playing? Am I feeling joy in what I'm doing right now? It's important to have that playfulness in the moment of every day, in a sense, and relax a little bit. And am I enjoying my company with friends? Am I taking time to do that? Am I really enjoying that lollipop I was describing, like make it last? That's what that TED Talk really gave me. Are you doing that right now? And I think everybody needs to do that at some point in time. And your message there is very valid. We do need to remind ourselves to relax a little bit and add that playfulness and jokes and have fun along the way. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Create time for inspiration. Actually, that's one thing for me when I know I'm too drained. It's most forcing myself to go to a concert or artistic experience, dance, ballet, or a show or some sort of performer. That to me, watching somebody else perform creates a space of inspiration for me to recharge. And I always have to force myself to buy the ticket and create a time. Like creating the time for it, that's the worst thing, right? Carving out from your busy calendar. Yeah. But when I do, right after that, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better and so much more inspired and so much more productive. And so I really am focused on creating these spaces now every so often. And especially when I start feeling drained, I need to step away and create more time for myself to recharge, because I know I'm going to this spiral wheel of being too serious and being too negative about myself or my decisions, etc. And just creating space for whatever that is that brings you inspiration, right? And that can be different for different people.
Mm-hmm.
That is so smart, Clara. Yeah. For me, it's just on a micro habit perspective, I have been trying to recharge every day by being outside for an hour, walking the dog, and listening to something that inspires me. And just stepping away from whatever it is that's happening. I'm just blocking that hour every single day on my calendar, whatever it is that's going on around that day, because this is important for me to step away from, the desk, the hustle and bustle of the job and life, and just give myself that mental capacity to be outdoors and think and learn and recharge.
Yeah.
It's just become something that I've become very protective of that hour. And so whoever books try to book a meeting, I just say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not available at this time. Let's connect at a later time. And
prioritizing, right?
Love it.
Yeah.
Such a good exercise, and being uncompromisable with it or strict with it. I'm sure it was hard at the beginning, Dana. Is it easier?
Yes. And again, to be a little bit flexible, right? Sometimes I don't go at noon. Sometimes I go at 11 o'clock. But I know between 10 and 2, I'm going to be outside for 1 hour no matter what.
I love it. Yeah.
That I don't compromise on. When exactly is something that I play with depending on the needs of the day.
Yes.
How am I feeling that day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anna, do you have something you use for recharging?
You've inspired me both with many things. To Dana's point, actually, I did take away something, scheduling me time for yourself. I remember you said you go and have a facial treatment once a month or whatever it was, if it's a massage or something. Just make sure you put it on the calendar and owe it to yourself. And I actually started doing that. I can't even remember how long time back it was that you mentioned that, but I was like, oh, I should do that. And I did. And I've made it into a habit. And it's really nice to know this is my hour. This is when I'm going to give back to myself, for all the hard work you put in. And it's very rewarding to feel that you deserve to prioritize yourself. I think that's something that as busy moms or women, whatever it might be, we tend to forget about prioritizing ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's important, finding what works for you and iterating with it.
Yeah. I mean, nature walks is just very recharging. Yesterday, I had the fortune to meet up with an old colleague that I hadn't seen in a long time. And we took a walk in an area that's called Arbor Hills, and it was just the perfect weather for it. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning. It was very rewarding and very recharging to just go for an hour with a good friend company, just talk about life and things, and just see the green foliage everywhere, little paths that you didn't really know where they would take you, but it was fine. It's just beautiful, just new openings everywhere of new discoveries. That's a good memory I have now today, this weekend. When people ask you Monday morning, you go into the busy work, how was your weekend? Well, that's my memory.
That's your win.
Exactly. That's a little nugget I picked from this weekend. I really lived.
I love it.
So, yeah.
Other than that, I guess going back to your beginning, I'm now wondering if we ever answered your question, Anna. Like, if this happened to us, what would we do differently? But if I have to go through that experience, I would probably be quite upset. I'm sure I would cry, the same like the lady did at the beginning, probably panic. Then I would have to probably study the sickness and figuring out what is and isn't possible. And then I would definitely start thinking about spending more money. So I would accelerate my trips and stop saving for retirement and accelerate my Kilimanjaro trip and go scuba diving to Philippines and Belize and go hike to Patagonia. So I would probably just travel a whole bunch and would have to tell my mom and my sister to quit their job and go travel with me for a year.
Yeah.
Dana, Anna, if this happened to you, what would you do?
I would cash my 401k and whatever the time left. And if you've exhausted all options to do something about it, because I think I would approach it the same way too. What can I do about it? And if there's nothing you can do and you make your peace of it, then I would focus on creating as many memories with my children as much as possible, like filling up their memory box so that when I'm gone, they have something to lean back on and think of fondly.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It really makes one think. And that's really how I wanted to come in with the topic for the day. I've sort of been through somewhat of a situation like that. It was a 7-month enduring, painful situation where doctors misdiagnosed me and then I came out fine. And that left me with 7 months of gruesome thinking of how will my family continue without me. It was really not fun. And those moments make you think. And when I came out fine, since that day, I've just been filled with gratitude every single day. And I don't take the next day for granted. I just live here and now. And like your message was, Clara, I don't postpone anything now. Things you think you want to do when you're retired finally, don't postpone those. Do them now. Like I, for instance, love horses. I don't want to wait too long. We're getting back into dealing with horses and being out in nature more. And I love hiking. So I'm accelerating a lot of those things that matters to me. And of course, one priority I've made for myself is just really being present and in the moment when I'm with my family and really listening to what my family is saying. And when my children are talking to me, I'm really presently there. I'm not somewhere else looking at my phone or like, Sometimes I was too busy about planning the next things on my schedule with work. I don't do that anymore. I'm really, really present with them and making memories with them. So I think that's a really good lesson to learn. So I could tell that I really could relate when she was speaking in that TED Talk, and it really moved me. Some people never get that type of stop sign show up in their lives, but I thought it could be good to kind of raise it. What would we do differently if it did happen? So filled with gratitude every day.
I love that. So what's the next vacation for you, ladies?
For us, it's been a topic today.
Nice.
We were planning on all of us going to Lebanon, and then we changed our minds. It was just going to be me, and then today we changed our mind again that we may all go.
This sounds like a family voting situation.
Yes, it's unfortunately that part of the world is so volcanic.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to plan. But for me, there's definitely a trip to Lebanon this summer, whether it's by myself or the family, that's to be seen. And if we don't go with the family, we're thinking of going to Vermont. We've never been. And in the spirit of being more out in nature, I think it's a beautiful place in the summer. So we want to do more outdoorsy stuff. And then maybe a mini long weekend when school is over, just to kick off summer with a bit of a bang.
That sounds great.
Yes.
Anna?
Probably try to spend as much time outdoors as we can, but not in Texas. It's too hot in the summer to do that. Every time we ask ourselves, where do we want to go on our next vacation, is always the same answer nowadays. It's Tennessee. We want to go to Tennessee. We want to go to the Appalachian Mountains. We want to do some more hiking. It's just beautiful there. So I love being outdoors. Probably that's what we're going to do.
That sounds great.
How about you, Clara?
I've been thinking about it the past 2 days too. I have a hotel picked actually in Tulum. So I'm trying to combine that with some scuba diving. So hopefully we'll do a short trip with Trevor there in June or July. And then I'm trying to schedule a trip with my mom and my sister. So that's another thing I do, I guess, as we grow older and realizing the limited time my mom has, I guess my parents have. Every year I make time to go for amazing vacation with them. So I think Belize might be on the list. So my sister and I got into scuba diving now, and there's the Blue Hole, which is amazing, but haven't finalized it yet.
It's very pretty.
I'm just getting too excited here. I want to ask you, since we had this topic on this podcast today, do you all have or hold one of those lists of places to go visit in the world that are like must-sees? That you want to check off the list, such as climbing a certain mountain or do something.
Yes.
Before you go.
Yes, I have.
What's on your list?
These are lists we've made with Jad and the girls. So Egypt is top of list for them. I've been there before, but it would be fun to go visit with them. And Greece. My kids are so much into Roman mythology. especially Jad and Chloe. So when I do Greece, I love to eat. So I want to do France and Italy. So definitely a lot of Europe and maybe a few places in Asia one day. But for me, it's mostly Europe these days. But it takes a lot of conversation, and we're trying to plan a big trip next year.
Awesome. How about you, Clara?
So on my list right now is definitely Kilimanjaro, which we're going to be doing this year. And then I guess the scuba diving, I'm adding Mexico, Belize. I mean, there's so much scuba diving in the Caribbean. So one thing I'm excited about moving to Austin is the proximity to those islands. And the thought that I could maybe take like a quick 4 or 5 day trip, right? Because it's not such a big trek to fly from California there. So I hope to hit a lot of those islands over the next maybe few years. Patagonia is definitely on the list. New Zealand, Japan. Greece is also there, Dana. I have too many places. That's the problem. So I need to prioritize. And I've been really strict with it. And now I'm learning, even with the vacation, as far as we hit the places that we want to go 1 or 2 a year, it's great. Don't be too strict with it either. It's amazing new place anyways. Just somewhere where I haven't been. I love experiencing new cultures and countries. Argentina would be amazing too. Chile.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Argentina would be amazing. My kids definitely want to go there. They have a grandma from Argentina.
Oh, wow.
Imagine grandma is Argentinian and the kids have some Argentinian blood in them.
So
you definitely have to go, Dana.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not enough vacation days for so many places that are interesting to visit, right?
Yeah. And you got to catch the 401k to get them all for sure. I look forward to hearing about the vacation plans where we all land. If you enjoyed this episode, I want to ask you to please do 2 things that would help me greatly. 1, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcasting platform that you use to listen to this episode. 2, please share this podcast with a friend who you believe might enjoy it as well. It is a great way to remind someone you care about them by sharing a conversation they might be interested in. Thank you for listening.